As we've said, Scylla and I have lots of differences, and we often find ourselves laughing at them. Take the way we speak. While I try to use a minimum of words to get my point across, Scylla will use as many words as possible and often exaggerates wildly. And I tease her a lot about that, such as when she tells me she's bought 1,000,000 tons of groceries. Humour is such an important part of a healthy marriage. It functions rather like the oil in a car. Without it, the engine will seize up.
The third principle for handling conflict effectively is look for an us solution. People approach conflict differently. Some try to force their partner to do things their way. They go on the attack. Other people surrender. They may be frightened of disagreements. They want to hide, run away, or do anything to avoid confrontation. Still, other people bargain. They say, I'll do this if you do that. But that all too easily becomes, I won't do my bit because you haven't done your bit.
And none of these approaches builds closeness or is effective in resolving conflict. However, there's a way that is effective, and that's through seeking a solution together. It means seeing that really we're on the same side and working together on the issue causing the conflict as a team.
And sometimes that means delaying the discussion on a particular issue. I think we'd all recognise that there are bad times to try and resolve arguments. And at those times, we have to press an imaginary pause button and wait for a better moment. There are a number of bad times to argue, such as arguing in front of other people, as in the saying, don't air your dirty laundry in public, or just before a special occasion when emotions are heightened, or when we're in a rush, or when we've just walked in through the door at the end of a busy day.
But the number one worst time to argue for most couples is late at night. And that's because when we're tired, we can so easily get things out of perspective. In the early months of our marriage, our most futile arguments were always last thing at night. And then very helpfully, some friends who'd got married 2 weeks before us told us about what they called the 10 o'clock rule. They explained that if they were having an argument late in the evening, either one of them could call the 10 o'clock rule into play. And that meant the argument had to be paused and postponed until a better time, perhaps earlier the next evening or over a cup of coffee at the weekend.
And that was such a help for us, and we've often used the 10 o'clock rule over the years. Now, of course, waiting for a better time takes self-discipline. But learning self-discipline plays an important part in resolving conflict more effectively, and it has certainly been a big part for me. I am naturally more volatile than Nikki. I like to get things out into the open as soon as possible, and I find waiting for a better time really difficult. But I've come to realise that the disagreement doesn't always have to be resolved there and then, and I've learned that sometimes it isn't helpful to tell Nikki everything I feel straight away, and especially not late at night.
Using the 10 o'clock rule doesn't mean going to bed still angry with each other. The issue may not be resolved, but if either or both of us are aware we've said some unkind things, we need to apologise and forgive each other. That reassures our partner that our relationship is still okay, even though we haven't yet reached agreement about the issue. Delaying a disagreement may well involve some of us having to learn to control our temper, because if our anger is out of control, it can cause us to hurl accusations at each other in the heat of an argument, which will be highly damaging to our relationship.
If you're married to someone who's rageful, it's quite terrifying. Sometimes people who have issues with rage, most of the time they're not rageful, they just have these moments where suddenly everything goes crazy. Ideally, they're not physically abusive, but they may be verbally abusive, or they might damage property around the house if they're really mad at times. And even though they may not be rageful like that all the time, what happens is the person who's married to them lives in fear of that rage, so they learn to sort of tread on eggshells around the other person. I'd say to people who are feeling that that's them, you know, that's what they do, they are that rageful person, I would say firstly, notice that that's what you're doing, but also if you're really honest with yourself, be clear that actually you gain some benefit from behaving like that. Because if your wife or husband are scared of your rage, you kind of get to control them, you get to be in charge. And so kind of dealing with rage, beginning to manage that kind of anger requires us not only to notice how damaging it is, but also begin to come to terms with the fact that we're gaining some rewards from behaving in that way. So if you know that you have an anger problem, you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my goodness, that's me, that's what I do, then I think firstly, don't be ashamed to seek help. And when we seek help for anger, what we're really saying is, we're not saying I want my anger to go away. What we're saying is, I want to express my dissatisfaction in a way that's good for me, good for the person I'm married to, and good for both of us in our marriage. So ideally it becomes something that's productive and it's good and it moves us forward. And therefore I would say, if you feel you need help, go and look for that, and don't be ashamed of the fact that that's what you're after.
We're going to look now at 5 very practical steps that will help us to reach agreement and find an us solution. The first step is focus on the issue that's causing the conflict. Arguments so easily get widened and all sorts of other things get drawn in, so that sometimes we can't even remember what it was we were arguing about in the first place.
Identifying and focusing on the main issue prevents disagreements escalating. Imagine a 3-seater sofa, wife at one end and husband at the other. And this contentious issue is right between us, keeping us apart and stopping us hearing each other properly or seeing each other's perspective. Focusing on the issue means taking it from between us and putting it out in front of us. Then, as husband and wife, we can move together on the sofa with nothing between us and focus on the issue that's out in front of us rather than attack each other. When we do this, we find the issue itself becomes more manageable.
The second step to reach agreement and find us solutions is use I statements. In the heat of an argument, it is so easy to say you always or you never. But when we use either of these phrases, we're labeling each other's character. A much better way of putting it is to use I statements describing our own feelings. So rather than you never do anything to help, it's much better to say, I was really upset you didn't help me with the clearing up after dinner last night. And instead of, you always make us late, it's better to say, I don't like leaving for the train so late because it makes me feel really stressed. Using I statements helps us not to accuse or blame each other. And I know when I tell Nicky what I feel when I'm upset, he responds much more positively than if I attacked him with my words.
The third step is listen to each other. When we're having an argument, we're usually very keen our partner understands our point of view, but less keen to understand theirs. Making sure we listen will be especially relevant for us if we know we're better with words than our partner. So a simple but very effective ground rule when we disagree is take it in turns to talk.
The fourth step is brainstorm possible solutions. Now, this may sound unrealistic in the middle of a heated disagreement, but once you've done the first 3 steps, it's much more possible. It's amazing how many ideas we can come up with when we start discussing the issue and listening to our partner rather than attacking each other. So, for example, if the conflict is over money, some possible solutions may be to change who organises the finances. You could make a detailed annual budget together. That really helped us. Or one or both of you decide to use cash rather than the credit card. Another option might be you agree to sit down once a week to review your spending. Or perhaps you decide to ask for help from someone who is good with money. Sometimes it helps to write down a list of possible solutions to see the different possibilities.
The 5th step to reach agreement is decide on the best solution for now and review later. Try it out. If the solution works, the issue will stop causing conflict. If the one we try doesn't seem to work, we can go back to our list. These 5 steps for handling conflict have helped Scylla and me hugely when there's been an issue causing tension between us. But they require us to be prepared to make changes to our own behaviour and attitudes for the sake of our marriage. It's no good one of us always needing to be right or saying, that's just the way I am, while being critical of our husband or wife. The Bible quotes Jesus saying, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in someone else's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to remove the speck from the other person's eye." At the end of the day, the only person we can change in our marriage is ourselves.
Sometimes couples break up because they think they're incompatible. That's so sad. We're not incompatible unless we refuse to change, unless we refuse to adjust our behaviour for the sake of our marriage. I want to read a description written by a surgeon called Richard Seltzer of how one couple accommodated themselves to each other. I stand by the bed where a young woman lies, her face post-operative, her mouth twisted in palsy, clownish. A tiny twig of the facial nerve, the ones to the muscles of her mouth, has been severed. She'll be thus from now on. The surgeon has followed with religious fervour the curve of her flesh, I promise you that. Nevertheless, to remove the tumour in her cheek, I have cut a little nerve. Her young husband is in the room. He stands on the opposite side of the bed, and together they seem to dwell in the evening lamplight, isolated from me, private. Who are they, I ask myself, he and this wry mouth I've made, who gaze at and touch each other so greedily? The young woman speaks. Will my mouth always be like this, she asks. Yes, it will, I say. It's because the nerve was cut. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles. I like it, he says. It's kind of cute. And all at once I know who he is, and I lower my gaze. One is not bold in an encounter with a god. And unmindful, I see he bends to kiss her crooked mouth, and I so close. I can see how he twists his own lips to accommodate hers, to show the kiss still works. And I hold my breath and let the wonder in. We can only change when we know what matters to each other. Sometimes the real issues are buried under years of unresolved conflict, or we've never told each other what frustrates and hurts us. We can't assume our partner automatically knows. We must tell each other about the issues that matter most to us and why they're important to us. There's a big difference between requests and making demands. Requesting change of each other in marriage is a good thing. It's demanding change that is harmful.